multiple dimensions of water quality. And if one were to ask the question, how are we doing here with our water quality, the answer might be different depending upon the dimension of water quality that we're talking about. So Chuck, I'd just like you to get us started by clarifying some of the different dimensions of water quality, and also what are some of the direct and indirect indicators that are out there that'll let us know objectively how our water quality is, and are we using the right indicators? So Chuck, why don't you have the first bite at the apple on this one, and then we'll go to the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Frank. When we talk about water quality, it is important to recognize that it deals with many different aspects of how water interacts with our lives. When we started off with the Clean Water Act back in 1972, we were really primarily concerned in a large part about our drinking water quality, to make sure that we had a safe, reliable water supply. And I have to commend former Commissioner Pilon when the Peace River Minnesota Regional Water Supply Authority was created. That was one of the primary aspects of why that entity was created, was so that we could have large-scale water quality treatment to supply safe drinking water for the public. From that, we looked at other aspects of water quality in our community in particular. And when you think back to the 70s and into the 80s, when we were very concerned about all of the fecal coliform that were in our water bodies, we had numerous beach closures over and over in our community, even into the 90s. And so we spent a tremendous amount of resources on consolidating our wastewater treatment facilities throughout the community. Mercury, it's not a little thing. We still have health advisories on mercury in fish in our communities. And that's another aspect of water quality that doesn't get a lot of press, but something that we in the water quality business are very concerned about and track on a very close and reliable manner. Our beach monitoring program, we're out there monitoring our beaches weekly and sometimes 2 and 3 times a week throughout our community to make sure that we have safe beaches where people can wade and swim and do all those kinds of things. Today, we're starting to take a much more close look at nutrients. And when you say nutrients, even in our community, it has a wide variety of connotations, because in our place on the planet, in our watershed, we are not concerned necessarily about phosphate compared to the rest of the planet. As some of you may recall, that back in the 80s, there was FDA guidance that came out and took phosphate out of soaps throughout the nation, because phosphate was a really big issue. It still is a very big issue in most water systems, most watersheds in the nation. However, in our watershed, we're relatively rich in phosphorus naturally occurring at the ground surface. But because we are so rich in phosphorus, just that smallest bit of nitrogen that would be added to the water makes it very productive then for various kinds of algae growth. So when we talk about nutrients, when we talk about water quality, we really do need to think about what is the issue du jour in your community that needs to be addressed. And right now, where we are today, the public outcry, the public concern is over nutrients in general, and in our community, nitrogen specifically. So while we go forward and try to identify things that we should be looking at, that's kind of where we're trying to focus. I hope that kind of got to the back half of your question.
John.
Well, the other part of the question that Chuck didn't touch on too much was the metrics that we use and the parameters that we set for determining water quality with regards to, do we use a numeric criteria for dissolved oxygen, heavy metals, pathogens, and nutrients, or do we use biological indicators? And several rules have been written several different ways as to which methodology is the best. But if we are using the biological indicators as opposed to the numeric nutrients or the numeric criteria, then we need to make sure, we need to make certain that we pick the right biological indicator. Because relying completely, for instance, as we have been in the past on seagrass coverage, the Sarasota Bay system from Tampa Bay to Charlotte Harbor has seen a great increase in seagrass over the last 30, 40 years as certain water quality parameters were improved. However, over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen a decline in those seagrass beds coverage. So it's really more of an art of the science than it is the science of the science to pick the right metrics in order to ensure that the water quality parameters that you're setting are being met.
Yeah, and I agree with John, just to follow up on that very scientific. We had in Florida, at the mandate of the EPA, what's called total maximum daily loads. That's what he was talking about, the number of things that would be in your water. Now, we got sued by a large environmental group at the state level. We won that suit because our argument was that a lake, a well, a river, whether it be in a very different environment in North Florida and South Florida, all have different conditions. And so they were mandated to set, we were allowed to set total maximum daily loads for each of those, for those pollutants. I like what John says about the biological aspect of it, because I don't think that's been explored enough. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there to really, we're in a position now with what we're seeing in water quality that might be the next important.
So kind of following up on all three of my colleagues, maybe focus a little more on the current conditions that we're looking at. Although it's beautiful out, the water seems to be very clear. You've seen over the past several years alarming rates of increased nitrogen, and now it's pointing out a subsequent decline in seagrass coverage, which is an indicator of the health of our bay. So I would say that the state of our local waterways is manifested by long and painful red tide is of great concern. We'll talk about some of the things that we can do to address that.
And just a point of clarification, so if I understand the panel right, nitrogen has been trending upward in our local water bodies. How, my understanding, it might have been over the last 2 decades, but maybe you can correct me. And most recently, we're seeing losses in seagrass. Is that correct?
One of the challenges we have with even the seagrass coverages is that over the last 25 years or so, we've been monitoring nitrogen levels in the bay pretty rigorously. We have quite a few monitoring stations, and we've seen a general trend that it's been increasing. However, it's been very low levels, and the trend line has been relatively uniform. Over that same period of time, we've been mapping the seagrass coverages and have seen rises and declines that have virtually no correlation to the nitrogen concentrations. So that's one of the real challenges that we have between monitoring some chemical constituent and really identifying a biological outcome in that system. So for instance, the decline that we've seen, we do a very careful seagrass mapping exercise over 2 years. And we've seen a decline about like what we've seen in this last 2-year cycle 2 other times in the last 30-year record. And again, a relatively uniform, low, but increasing trend in nitrogen. So it's one of our challenges.
Okay, just again to signpost for our audience, one of the areas that I want to spend some time on, we're going to get into stormwater and wastewater issues, both wastewater treatment facilities as well as sewer and septic. Before I get there, down at the county level, though, I want to spend a little bit of time up at the statewide level with respect to the entity or the sector that has the largest, let's call it a footprint on our water quality statewide, is the agriculture sector. We regulate this sector through what's referred to as basin management area plans, and the primary tool for managing this sector or its water pollution is best management practices. And the state has been trying to get a number of farms and agricultural operators into a program. It's been criticized for issues with respect to monitoring, enforcement, and compliance, and that it's just presumed that everybody that's in the program is doing what they're supposed to do in terms of BMPs. This was not really addressed in the last major piece of legislation that we had statewide. This happened in 2016. Ray, you were up in the legislature and certainly were deeply involved in that piece of legislation. It was largely an omnibus water quality bill. There were lots of parts of it. Attention to the springs in Florida probably got the most attention, but there were a lot of other components. I'm going to return to you, Ray. I'd just like you to comment generally on the state. There's a lot happening right now, but in 2016, in that major piece of legislation, what do you think that it did well? What do you think that it did not do so well and or fail to address? And I wouldn't mind a specific comment on the BMP approach that we have in the state and whether or not, as a big idea, we need to do something a bit different in terms of managing the sector.
Yeah, certainly. It was purported as being an omnibus bill. It had, that means it takes in 9,000 different things. A lot of great things, the springs, and the first quality springs, they're in tier. Reuse was addressed, a lot of great things. And it was used as a stepping stone for what I hope will happen in the future to the legislature, that they will move forward on some of the things, because they tie into everything we're talking about here. The failure was the best management practice. Did I vote for it? Yeah, because it's an omnibus bill and there were so many good things in it, I wasn't going to fight it. But what happened there is the particular chairman of the committee that sponsored the bill brought it forward. It had all those things, it had monitoring, it had penalties, it had all kinds of great things. And as so often happens, the ag industry lobbied against it, and it got weakened. It got weakened to the point that if they fought it and tried to continue it, it would have tanked the entire bill. My hope is that in the future, and the reason they did it is we talked about the areas first, and their best management practices for agriculture in each different area of the state, because they are different. My hope is, I don't like sticks and I like carrots. What we've been able to do with agriculture in the past, for example, right here in DeSoto County, where we had salt infiltrating into the wells for agriculture. Swift Mud, for example, gave them a carrot and said, we can help you get better production. So they used your tax dollars to help agriculture to backfill those wells to stop the salt water from coming up. The result is that the crop that they were able to grow was much more productive with better water, obviously. In addition, you see a lot of agriculture that has been given incentives to put ponds, little reservoirs on their properties all over the state, particularly in the agricultural areas, so that they can reuse the water or clean it before it's discharged. So a lot of things happening, but there are a lot of things that weren't happening. So they increased the best management practices with no teeth to it, and that was unfortunate. So my hope is that it moves forward. Yes, it has teeth so that we can have monitorings. For example, they put wells, the wells that are monitoring in several areas of the state now by all the water management districts, particularly Swift Mud. They'll put a free meter on there so you can see what your water usage is, so that you can maybe start using less water with drip irrigation or a lot of different things. So we've done a lot in the state of Florida. There's a lot more to be done. The crisis that we're experiencing now, or have experienced, has brought it all to the attention. So here's the deal. When we move forward with that omnibus bill, we can take those sections out and improve them. Let me give you an example, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, if you want.